Hi, everyone. So I am here with Chauntae. She just graduated from her fourth year at Queen's University and is headed to the University of Ottawa in the fall to study law. Chauntae, it would be really awesome if you could give the audience a quick introduction, tell us a little bit about yourself, your hobbies, and your history, and what you're looking forward to in the next steps of your journey.
For sure. Thanks for that, Roya. So I'm Chauntae. I just graduated from Queen's. I graduated in sociology with a minor in global development studies. And during my time at Queen's, I was involved with Queen's Women in Leadership, Queen's Female Leadership in Politics, and the Student Alumni Association, to name a few different extracurricular roles, alongside working with the AMS and the Arts and Science Undergraduate Society. So currently I'm heading to the University of Ottawa for law school in this fall 2020. And, I really just enjoy being a part of community work and, giving back to different groups in whatever way I can.
Yeah, no, you were definitely incredibly involved in the Queen's community, and I think everyone can attest to that if they were able to work with you, how great of an experience it was. I know you also have done some government and community work in your summers. Do you want to give a bit of context to that so people can kind of know how your experience has transcended even the Queen's community?
For sure. So I started out working in the government in my high school career, and I started with the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services within the Ontario Public Service. And I worked with official documents and I authenticated it for international business. And then later I went on to work for the Ministry of Finance in tax collection, where I learned a lot about government processes and, how to, collect funds from different people that were owing things to the government. And then I kind of moved into policy writing, where I got the opportunity to work with Cabinet Office, and that was in the Health, Social, and Education Policy Division. And that was really exciting because it was within the first 100 days of the new government starting with Premier Ford. So there was a lot of turnaround on policy portfolios, and it was a fun environment and definitely a very interesting and memorable experience. And now, most recently this summer, I got to work with the Ministry of Natural Resources, and I work for the Associate Deputy Minister's office, and I help with their IT projects alongside some of their communications pieces. And then I'm currently going to start a job next week, actually, which is exciting, working for the Ontario Anti-Racism Directorate. So I've had a fair share of experiences with the Ontario government, and I'm excited to, continue my journey in whatever I choose to do with my career in the future.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that with all of us. Clearly, Chauntae has a wealth of experience in government and community work, and I'm sure law school will just continue to complement that skill set of yours. I guess moving into kind of one of the main things we wanted to chat about today is really talking about social justice issues in the Queen's context and how students can better educate themselves and better engage in these topics on campus. So the first part of the question, the first part of what we want to chat about today is, of course, as an arts and science student, you've had a little bit of familiarity with some of the courses that are offered, especially at the 100 and 200 level, that are introductory for students that might not be studying that as their major or might be studying in a completely different faculty. And of course, we've seen over the last couple months, there's been an increased interest in taking those courses, especially in the fall semester when we're going to be online, and potentially even in the winter semester. So just from your experience and your social circles and different people you've communicated with, are there any courses particularly that you think students should keep on their radar to learn more about, whether it be Indigenous issues, issues of race and gender, or so on, any societal issues that they can better educate themselves about in the classroom context at Queen's?
Degree requirements, and I took a course called Soc 235, so Soci 235, and it was race and racialization. And to me, it was kind of my first introduction to, I guess, academic discourse on like the construct of race, race relations with policing, with Indigenous communities. We watched the film Colonization Road. We talked about what does multiculturalism really mean, and just how race is navigated differently when we think about intersectionality and things like that, and just overlapping identities as well. So that was a course I would highly recommend, especially to those specifically in the social sciences. And I can also think back to, in first year, I took Genders 120, and it's the introductory course to, I guess, gender studies. It's women, gender, and difference. And I really liked it because it was probably my first experience writing things related to social justice in my academic career. I feel like, when you're often coming from high school, you don't really address a lot of those topics. It's kind of a set curriculum, pretty rigid. But this was an opportunity in my first year, Genders 120, where I wrote about it was Muslim women and wearing the veil and what it meant for gender norms and expressing one's gender. And it was something I wouldn't have gotten the opportunity to engage with otherwise. So I found that really insightful, as well as learning about intersectionality. That was the first time I've ever heard the term. We were kind of like quizzed on it, and it was drilled into us about how it represents overlapping identities and its experience through both privileges and systems of oppression. And I think from having that continuous like reflexive learning about what intersectionality means and how it's experienced in our own lives in our small group seminar or tutorials actually, that was really valuable to me, and I would highly recommend that course to anyone in the future. And if Scott Morganson still teaches it, he's a great prof, so 10 out of 10. And thinking to some other gender courses or social justice courses I've taken, I quite enjoyed feminist topics in sociology. It's kind of, or feminist sociology. So it's a course like Soc 303. And it was a new professor that year, but we discussed a lot of things about like body image, and we used like theoretical people such as like Foucault and the belief about, how we police our own bodies, but at the same time society polices it for us based on certain norms. And we thought about certain like challenging issues about like it's called biopolitics. It's another Foucauldian term, and just in general how just we choose to navigate the world in social issues specifically related to gender and I guess feminist issues. So that was another one that I would definitely highlight. And as I think about another course that I found maybe less social justice related, or I guess like feminism or women's topics, I really, really loved this one course in my program called Science Technology Studies, this sociology course, Soc 363. And we looked at why we trust scientists and why social justice is important, because science is what guides a lot of movements and technology is what allows movements to flourish and different things like that. And it kind of connects to another course by the same professor, like Soc 284. Mm-hmm. And we look at just technology's impact on how we function and the good and the bad. So when we think about Facebook and other systems, and how they kind of are the forefront of leading change and getting activists to gather and, share information and things like that. So anything related to, like I say, technology or surveillance studies often has that critical gender or social justice part of it to it, a component to it. And then to wrap up, I'd say in my fourth year, I took Commerce 407 or Com 407, and it was Critical Perspectives on Business. This course really stuck out to me because although I'm a sociology student and I'm sitting in a commerce class, we talked about a lot of things that were very similar to what I had talked about for most of my degree program. We looked at, different economic systems, which relates to a lot of my global development degree, how, business functions inadvertently can impact social inequality, and a lot of different things. So we read some books on climate change and the impact of capitalism on that. We read about Karl Polanyi and his views on, capitalist system kind of reaching a tipping point and having to reset itself. And it's called the double movement. But that was a course that really stuck with me, especially in the commerce context, because the value it brought in terms of widening my view on business and the overlap between social issues as well. Mm-hmm. And we got to go to one of the climate strikes in Kingston, actually. And it was a fun assignment because we got to report on how it made us reflect about climate change in our lives as young people, as well as how businesses can do better. And finally, I'd like to highlight, I took a course, Genders 312. It's offered every other year. So I guess every odd year, because I took it in fall 2019. It's with Professor Catherine McKittrick, and it's called Black Feminisms. And I think this course is probably the most insightful course I took in my fourth year. Mostly because you look at issues not just as, okay, well, let's say, for example, like Black Lives Matter. We didn't really talk about that in the course. We talked about what were the systems and the institutions and the overall structures of society that led to things like the Black Lives Matter movement. How did racism start with when we think about slavery? So we did read actually 2 slave narratives. And there's a term I actually remember learning a lot, and actually it was more so about how the historical present, that was the term. And the historical present means that whatever took place in the past has a continuous impact on current day. And so, for example, in the course, we discussed a lot about how slavery and a lot of the connotations and a lot of the stereotypes, when you think about the Jezebel, when you think about the mammy stereotype, all these different things, it actually continues to have this ideology shared today in modern racism. And I think this course really made me think about why people are the way they are in society now, and how to unlearn these things when they're so deeply rooted, and having those conversations about thinking critically. So that course, 11 out of 10, like I would recommend it to any student. I'd say as well, I really appreciate that a lot of students that were non-people of color, like non-BIPOC, and they were willing to learn, and I think that was really valuable to me. And I'd say overall, those courses were the best ones that I took in my undergrad degree. I guess I can repeat them. So Genders 120 is a great course, along with Soc 235, Com 407, Sociology 303, and 363. And as well, to end it off, Genders 312 is a great course, Black Feminisms. So I apologize for rambling on a bit there about courses. I just love talking about the things I've learned. I feel as though social justice issues have been at the forefront of my entire degree. Just thinking about when we learned about consumer culture in my second year and how it relates to social hierarchies and different things, social processes, it all relates back to social justice, like consumption, or when I had a course on cities and architecture and how they shape society, goes back to where slums are in the global south, or when I was learning about the global political economy in second year in Devs 230, we learned about just essentially how the Bretton Woods regime and the Washington Consensus and all these other austerity measures and formal coalitions amongst governments have an impact on how societies around the world have functioned today. And at the end of the day, social justice is everywhere. People can't really try and hide from it. It's ingrained in how we function as a society. It's ingrained in how we create change, how we evolve. And it's so important that people are actively seeking out opportunities to learn more.
No, that was awesome. So helpful. I'm sure people are going to have a lot easier of a time navigating fall courses now when they're looking at ways they can educate themselves. I have a good question to actually build off of that, especially for students that find themselves outside of the Faculty of Arts and Science. But first, I also just want to add, I've also taken Genders 120 as a commerce student and found it was so incredibly valuable. I would recommend it to everyone. It's a very good introductory level course. You don't have to worry about coming in with any prior knowledge. And as Chauntae said, it really teaches you what intersectionality is and how it impacts every aspect of one's identity and how one navigates the world. So I would highly recommend that if anyone is considering taking that course, do it. And then I would just add on to that as well, I've taken Devs 220, which is Introduction to Indigenous Studies. Chauntae, have you taken that one as well?
So I took Devs courses, and one of them was on political ecology. And we talked a lot about Indigenous issues and how it interacts with the environment. And that was for my fourth year seminar. And it really resonated with me, because a lot of times when we think about policy approaches, or we think about, the social problems, we sometimes forget about the environment. So I'd say a lot of upper year courses are really insightful. So I know it might be a little more daunting, especially being out of faculty, but if you have the opportunity to make it a personal interest credit, why not engage with an upper year devs course? But I also took Law 202, so that's Aboriginal law, and I really enjoyed that we did a mock treaty negotiation, and there's kind of split off into groups, and one person is the government, one person is the Indigenous community, and another group is the corporation, and you argue about, well, I want to build this on your land, similar to the Keystone XL pipeline, and the other things that Trans Canada pipeline, all those other things, just like our current events. And you're presented with a situation, then you're like, well, this feels awfully familiar, but I'm the corporation and I say I want to make the money, and the community says, well, I want to protect my land and my culture. So it really taught me a lot. So I highly recommend Aboriginal law 202. and for sure any upper year devs courses on Indigenous issues.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Chauntae. I guess the question that I said was kind of a pressing question I wanted to bring up was particularly for students in engineering, commerce, programs where we don't necessarily do a lot of essay writing or any academic writing really, honestly, I think up until maybe your third or fourth year. What kind of recommendations, or not even recommendations, what would you do to advise them that it is an introductory level course? You don't need to come in with a lot of prior knowledge. It's an opportunity for you to learn and to engage with completely new material. Like, what would you communicate to them about those fears and about those hesitations?
Mm-hmm. I think back to, I took a course in first year. It was Politics 101, and it's contemporary issues in politics, and it discusses the Trump election. And the professor, Jonathan Rose, one of probably the Queen's most popular politics professors, he really approached it where come and see him during office hours, utilize tutorial to learn more. Let's build up your writing skills. And I think it's important to use those resources when profs are, often, or seek out those profs that want to give you the opportunity to develop your skills and maybe aren't used to having those who aren't taking it as a core course. And I think overall, it's important to kind of, we have campus resources, right? So don't be afraid to reach out and find, someone to read over your essay, or, make friends in the class that can help you. And at the end of the day, we're all here to learn. And, not everyone can have a 4.3, and it's important to, focus on, at the end of the day, you leave knowing more than you started off with, and that's important. And ultimately, we just want you to be open-minded. We want you to challenge yourself. It'll make a great interview story to say you took a course that you weren't skilled in with a certain topic and you came out with a better grade than anticipated. It shows resiliency and dedication and drive and ambition. And I think that's what's really important. And at the end of the day, again, just utilize resources around you.
Awesome. That was so helpful, Chauntae. I appreciate that. And hopefully students can get that perspective when they're considering their courses for next year and for future years if people continue to listen to our podcast. I guess kind of the next question as we try to wrap things up is, what's in the pipeline for you? What does the next couple years look like? Let everyone know. I mean, you just blessed us with all of your informative knowledge. We'd love to know what's coming down the road for you.
So I haven't figured out the next step, but I do know what the options are. My friends would definitely be aware that I'm very much so a planner. So I always have 10 plus options for my next move at my fingertips.
Plan A, B, C, gotta go.
That is correct. Yeah. So I'm pursuing my law degree, which I think I mentioned, and I'm looking into, I guess, public or private is kind of the determining factor of where I'd end up working. But if I go more about like private practice and corporate law, I'm interested in torts and like civil disputes, like in litigation. So that kind of looks at wrongdoing and, like your TV lawsuit type of perspective, although oftentimes it's not what you see on TV, not so glamorous. As well, I'm interested in kind of business stuff such as mergers, acquisitions, commercial real estate, also, technology and IP law, intellectual property. So that's something I'm definitely passionate about. And I think if I go more of like the public sector route or public facing legal route, I'd be interested in maybe doing, whether it's policy development or looking at becoming a crown attorney and doing criminal law from that side. I think that's kind of what lies ahead. We'll see where life takes me. There are many beautiful avenues. Who knows? I've also wanted to be a McKinsey consultant one day in the future. So we'll see where I end up. That's for sure. Feel free to add me on Instagram or LinkedIn and you can keep up with me.
Chauntae's the plug. You want to have her in your life. She is the best, an amazing friend.
Oh, you're so sweet.
I guess the last thing, I do want to kind of leave it on a more reflective note. What is one piece of advice you would give a student who is just beginning this journey? Unfortunately is the wrong word. A student that is just starting to dip their toes into these topics and wants to make a commitment to themselves and to their community to learn more, and particularly to the Queen's community, to hold the Queen's community accountable, to hold their peers accountable, and to engage, to learn and to unlearn. If there was one piece of advice you could leave them with as they begin this journey, what would you say?
This is a big question. I feel as though I can only speak from my experiences and maybe some of the stuff I've seen my peers do, but I think it's goes back to being open-minded. At the end of the day, you can't learn or unlearn or engage with topics if you don't have an open-minded mentality. And especially when it comes to social justice, if you aren't open-minded, that also connects to listening and having empathy. um, it means you won't be willing to step into other people's shoes, or give them a chance to share their story and ultimately want to learn more. So I think at the end of the day, if you are open-minded and you are putting yourself out there and being a supporter of letting people share their voice, and that's what's important.
Awesome. Thank you, Chauntae. And if anyone wants to get in touch with Chauntae, I will leave her social media handles in the blog post above or below. Not sure. One of the two. Give Chauntae a follow. You will not regret it. Produces great content and will be the future Prime Minister of Canada one day. I called it in this podcast that will be on the internet forever. So thanks everyone for listening. We hope you enjoyed it, took something away. If you want to get in touch with either of us, we are just a Facebook message, email, or LinkedIn message away. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you want to chat further about any of the topics we chatted about today. Thanks everyone.
Thank you so much, Roya, for having me on your podcast. I'm happy to have shared some insight, and I hope everyone enjoyed listening.
Woo! Thanks guys.